Yes, I'm Councilwoman Adriana Rocha Garcia, District 4.
Okay, and I understand you're also mayoral candidate.
Yes, I will be officially filing my paperwork probably next week, and I'm just ready to do this.
Okay, so why run for mayor?
Well, we look at what the current mayor has done for our city, and it's been a great run for him. There's been a lot of help from the federal government. There's been a lot of support throughout, for instance, the COVID opportunities. And so we need to continue some of the momentum, but we also have to face some realities. And so when we think about why we're running for mayor, personally, I want to run because I want to help people. And it's going to be a difficult few years that are ahead for the city of San Antonio. And that's why I decided to go ahead and run.
Okay, and that was kind of my next question is, why now? You still could have another term as a councilwoman, so why choose to run now?
I could have another, wait, I don't even have to repeat the question because you're doing this live now. So I'm used to repeating the question, so never mind. I think that the opportunity to help an entire city is critical. The reason that I decided to run for mayor instead of stay in my council seat is I feel like there's people that can benefit from the work that I've done, but extend it into the entire community. And so the residents of District 4 have had me for 3 terms. I've been reelected with really high percentages, which means that I'm doing a good job for them. And I feel like I've also empowered others to be ready for the D4 spot. So I'm always in just constant readiness mode, I would call it, right? And so what is plan B, what's plan C, what's plan D? And I feel that I've had several people that come to mind that I know would do great if they decide to run. And so I'll be talking to them over the next few weeks as well so that they could consider it. I've been working with the community, making sure to get engagement from my residents on different committees. And so it's important to have that who's next, right? Who comes next? And that's why I also decided to run for mayor, because this next mayor can have a great vision, but reality also needs to sink in. There's going to be some tough economic times ahead. And I have a front row seat right now as a city council person. And I could tell you that I want to focus on priorities like public safety and neighborhood services, which would include housing. And of course, we can talk about the infrastructure needs, which also, by the way, mean talent infrastructure. So jobs and opportunities for our residents to have good jobs, great paying jobs, that would really help our economic development as a whole in San Antonio. The reality is that we also have to weigh out all of the areas where we will need additional support. When we consider that there's not going to be as much money coming down from the federal government, when we consider that money is going to stop trickling in from the ARPA funding, and nonprofits are going to be already hard pressed for funding because we don't have as big a philanthropy pool here in San Antonio. When we consider that our sales taxes, our revenue is down because people are not spending. When we consider that we have our property taxes that are not collecting as much money because we in fact gave some additional help and relief to our taxpayers, much needed relief to our taxpayers a couple of years ago, we're now seeing that bottom line affected. When we think about CPS energy revenue, and this year alone, it hasn't been as projected. Then you add into the fact that we have a firefighter contract, we will have a police contract in a couple of years. We really have to sit down and think about what's going to affect our bottom line. Then, on top of all of this, I get to have a front row seat on the Bear Appraisal District. And this year, we have 3 people who were elected onto the board. And so when I got on the board, I asked, can we do appraisals every 2 or 3 years? I read in the tax code that we could. I was told no. So I have my staff researching right now, wait a second, who told me no and what was the reason? Because now some folks are being told that we can. And so we have to prepare for that reality. How is that going to affect our budgeting? How is that going to affect our bond ratings? How is that going to affect any chances of us being able to borrow? And so we have to think of all of those realities, combine it with a vision, and have someone that is willing to collaborate and do the work. Garrett, I'm not running for this spot to get something else later. Mayor of San Antonio is all I want to be, and then I will retire from politics. I don't want to use this as a stepping stone. I just want to get my community through the tough times.
Why do you think you're the person to do it? You laid out several reasons on why you want to be mayor, but there are other people running. Why do you think you're better than them to handle some of these challenges?
One, I'm always prepared. So out of candidates that you have probably already heard from, I don't know that anyone could articulate yet all of the problems that I just listed. I don't know that they're all thinking about them quite yet and the impact. But beyond that, I am San Antonio. I am born and raised here in San Antonio. I was born on the west side. My parents moved to the southwest side, which is D4, where I've lived since I was 3 years old. I grew up like the average San Antonian. My parents, they were not rich. They were not veterans. They did not even have an English education. They still only speak Spanish. My dad was a construction worker. My mom was a housewife. And I grew up in Indian Creek. And for a long time, when I was growing up, that was the most crime-infested part of the city. In fact, if I say that I'm from the Creek, people know exactly what I'm talking about. I still go to the Creek every single night. I visit my parents every single night. And I'm dealing with realities that our residents are dealing with. I've raised a child on my own. I'm a single mom. Imagine how many single moms are out there trying to get ahead. I want to be able to work on their behalf and say, I've been there and I want to help you.
You mentioned your attention to detail, and it's true. You have a reputation for getting really into the nitty-gritty of different policies or initiatives that come up before the council. But I do struggle to think of, in a high-profile initiative where you've been the driving force. So is there something that you'd point to for voters? Because you are involved in most conversations, but I do, having covered the council for a couple of years, I'm trying to think of, an issue that, you helped drive through council. So is there something you would point to?
Sure. Vaccines on the south side and getting folks through COVID. I did not rest. I did not have a winter break. I was on the phone with people New Year's Eve. I was so worried. I got a group of people together, and I do it all of the time. In fact, I have made sure that I bring people of diverse perspectives together to solve problems. And that was one of the ones that I feel most confident with, because I knew the community that I represented, and I knew that a lot of them wouldn't be able to drive long distances. And a lot of them were already just kind of ready to wait until it came to their side. I didn't want them to have to wait. And so I was able to bring together a group of people to discuss this, and we got it done. We got vaccines on the south side.
In your 3 terms on council, or you're midway through the 3rd term, what do you think is the mark that you've made on city policy, or for the south side?
For the south side, I definitely think that we have had growth levels, and specifically in investing in our communities. We had more than 1,000 housing units that were built or started getting built within a 3-month period, and more if you extend it to about 6 months. And so that's diversity of homes. So we have anything from Habitat to Humanities to apartments that you can rent out at different levels to market rate. That's all going on in District 4. When we also think about the opportunities for jobs and the creation of jobs, we were able to help bring more than $1 billion in investment in the 6 months of this year alone. That's more than 1,000 jobs. And we were able to do it collectively. And as a champion of the people, I like to remind folks that we have to make sure that we watch out for our communities. And that, yes, it's absolutely important for growth and development, but we can't leave others behind. And so I bring that to the table as a San Antonian for life. I have seen it. I'm just ready for the challenge.
When you talk about development, and especially in your district borders the Toyota manufacturing plant, where right now there's a pretty controversial discussion on introducing a new type of zoning overlay to basically restrict what can be built up within, I think it's 2 miles of within a few miles of the plant. So that does bleed over into your district. Where do you stand on this proposal? Because that's what I think a lot of people in your district are looking at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the health of my district is important. And so when we think about the overlay, and Garrett, when I got on council, I was trying to figure out why was this originally proposed, right? And so I understand that within at least a 1 mile radius, I could understand why there would be some concerns. So it's important to figure out how to protect our folks. However, it's also important to realize that the South Side has room to grow. We need housing, and we've actually voted on, as a council, on different developments within the 2 to 3 mile boundary that is being talked about. And so I would love for the entire community to come together. Unfortunately, I feel like there wasn't enough of the community engagement the first go around, but I do think that we need to protect our residents, and we need to get them all in the room together to do so.
Okay. There's now been several occasions where everybody has been in the same room, often very tensely. So what do you think the path forward is for this? The zoning board had already recommended against it. You've got a lot of very, strongly opinionated voices against it on the South Side as well. So do you think there's a way that this still happens, and how does that look?
Yeah, well, we have to go back to the drawing table, right, and start from scratch. There were very opinionated voices. Unfortunately, some of those opinionated voices that have a louder microphone don't even live in the district. And so it's interesting to see that when it's turned around and something is happening in their district, that they're the ones to call that out, that people not from their district are making decisions. And so the point being that we all have to work together. It's the San Antonio that we live in. It's the city that we love, want to see grow, want to see prosper for our future generations. And so we all have to come together and figure it out together.
What do you think it should look like, this overlay?
I definitely think that there should be some concern for the health. And so what do we do? Specifically, like, where can we get some additional information about what type of a mile radius, right? That's where we have to start from scratch again. Go back, do all of the research, and then bring in the residents as well, as soon as we have that research, and let them know this is why we're trying to do this.
You talked about some of the problems that you anticipate for the city. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the city right now?
I think right now it's crime. And whether it is increased or not, the perception alone of crime is enough to scare people. I mean, when you are working outside on your vehicle at your home, doing nothing to anybody, and something tragic happens, we know there's a problem.
How do you propose tackling that?
We're going to have to work with our chief of police and have discussions that say, how can we better integrate technology? How can we use technologies that perhaps are being implemented in other cities? How do we make sure that we fund mechanisms that help our police officers do their jobs better, respond better? Our police officers do a great job already, but sometimes they don't have the tools. And that's what I'm looking for. How can we make them more efficient? How can we respond to calls a lot faster by perhaps integrating some technology?
If you think crime is the biggest problem, what do you think the violent crime prevention plan that's still going on? We've got the hotspot policing, trying the place-oriented policing method now with the spot over on the east side. So what do you think about that approach? Is that enough to handle it?
I like the plan. There's some good things on there. I was a critic of some of the low-hanging fruit that was going to take forever to do that I thought that we could do in a lot less time. However, I do think that with the hotspot policing, they're just going to move around. So I feel like we have to take a deeper dig into the information that we've collected now and say, okay, it's working, but what happened? Like, where did that crime move? And so definitely some further data crunching now that we've had the plan going for some time. And so we have the opportunity also, for instance, to look at some alternatives, right? So again, I mentioned technology earlier. So is there something that helps us find where these shots are coming from? I hear that all the time on Nextdoor. And so if you are a neighbor on a Nextdoor app, you probably constantly see or hear that you heard gunshots fired, et cetera. And so the triangulation method, what are other cities doing to do that? Now, beyond that, the legislature, right, so working with our state representatives, with our senators, is going to be important because gun violence is a problem. We've seen in the last month even that a lot of the crimes that were committed, and we can think about some of the downtown crimes, unfortunately, they were committed by teenagers. And so what are we doing to make sure that teenagers have the ability to confide in adults, to have a place to be, to have a place where they can go and they can experience healthy habits and not necessarily be out in the streets with people who are encouraging them to use guns.
You mentioned triangulation of shots. The Chief McManus has spoken pretty frankly that he didn't think the shot spotter technology the city's had in the past worked. So are you calling for a return to that? Or?
Well, I'm not calling it for a return to that, but I'm talking about what's the new technology. Like, what is the new triangulation, if you will? What are some opportunities that we have? And it might be that maybe some city is using something, maybe they're not. Maybe it's time that we figure out as a team what kind of software we would need. Everything's so advanced nowadays that I tend to think that we need to use technology to improve our lives.
Well, you're talking about technology, but typically when council ends up talking about crime, it almost invariably turns to how many police officers there are available. The city's in the midst of trying to grow by several hundred officers. I know that there's probably a lot of neighborhood groups out there who want more. Many people think there's too many, such as some of your colleagues. I know Councilman Mickey Rodriguez and his chalkboard are always glad to point that out. But I want to know what your thoughts are, because that is something that most people say. Do you think San Antonio Police Department needs to be bigger?
So when you asked earlier about my interest in this, and I said I grew up in the creek, this is exactly why I think that we need some additional police presence. So I'm always going to be of the mind frame that we need additional police presence around. And so when we talk about growing our budget, when we talk about the number of people that are coming, we're definitely going to have increased numbers of police. We are working on the new substation on the south side in District 3. And so how are we going to properly staff that? How are we going to staff up to make sure that our levels are adequate for the numbers of people that are moving into San Antonio to feel safe?
City of San Antonio is set up as essentially a bureaucracy-run city with, city council and mayor making policy decisions, but a lot of that nitty-gritty detail, which you're known for getting into, is typically left up to the city staff side. What do you view the role of the mayor as, and how would you wield the power that the mayor has or doesn't?
I feel like the mayor should be the convener. And so when we think about how the mayor has the opportunity to meet with the city manager, the mayor has the opportunity to meet with the council members as well. One of the things that I think that is missing is that they should be beyond just council meetings talking pretty regularly. And so the conversation that happens, for instance, on the north side of town, on the south side, on the east side, on the west side, it needs to be able to be had with multiple council members before it gets to council. So if something is affecting the south side, I work together with District 3 and sometimes with District 5 because she also represents some of the south side. But it's working together for a portion of the city, bringing the issues up to the mayor and then bringing the city manager in as well. I have heard that some people think that the city staff has the ability to shape and influence, but that's where it comes to us as policymakers to be able to help with that and really help that before it even gets to be a problem. Now, I was a city staffer. So I worked at the city manager's office as a special projects manager, and I worked under Cheryl Scully. And that's the reason that my homework has always been done, Garrett, because if I walked into a meeting with her and I didn't know the answer, it wasn't gonna be good. And so, but she was a strong woman, is a strong woman, and I was grateful to have that preparation.
What's your vision for the city, given how you laid out what you think your role would be if elected mayor?
My vision for San Antonio as mayor would be to be transformational, not just transactional. We have, yes, a lot of work ahead of ourselves, but we also are at this pivotal point in our city's history where we have to go all in to be recognized as a city of the future. I've been fortunate enough to represent District 4 in Port San Antonio, and the visionary leadership that has been taking place there has shaped a lot of the decisions that I've made, because I think about the jobs of the future. I think about education as the greatest equalizer. I think about how we give that opportunity and that access to the residents, like the one that I represent, when they're literally 1 minute away from losing hope every single day.
How do you balance that vision with what you say are some ongoing or some upcoming challenges and hardships where you pointed out potential loss of funds? I mean, ARPA money will run out. CPS energy revenue at the moment, not doing well. It's not the perpetual over budget on revenue. And I think you'd mentioned sales tax revenue in previous conversations. But considering you're going to have these challenges, how do you achieve your vision if it sounds like we're talking more about tightening the belt?
It's going to be about collaboration. It's going to be about bringing different perspectives. It is going to be about tightening the belt. It's going to be about bringing in the spending that we've been able to do and really figuring out what other upstream avenues might be available for us to solve problems. And it's going to take each one of us. It's not only going to take the 11 of us who are elected and the city manager, it's going to take a community buy-in, and it's going to take a lot of listening and a lot of collaboration, because we're not the smartest people in the room or in the city by any means. And we need to have the smartest people with us so that we are prepared for the challenges that lie ahead.
Okay. And with the budget coming up, I mean, this is, as you're running for mayor, this will be your last budget as a council person, one way or the other. Either you're elected or you'll just finish out your third term. So what do you anticipate being your big priorities, and how should people interpret that as to how you'll carry that over into being mayor if you were to be elected?
One of the big priorities is really looking at that forecast ahead. I've asked the city manager if we could have Plan B, Plan C for when funding runs out. So it's going to take looking beyond this budget, and I feel like we have to prepare. But the other priority is also, I briefly mentioned it earlier, but it's going to be our youth services. And we know that there's going to be some tough decisions that are going to need to be made, but we also know that youth are the ones that are falling prey to gun violence, for instance. How do we make sure that we have funding for after-school programs? That's why last week at the session for the charter amendment, I asked for some additional support, and some policy discussions to happen during this year's budget sessions from Eric Walsh to see how we make sure that we prioritize children and that we don't cut from those much needed services that benefit them and ultimately benefit our entire community.
You're the fourth candidate to enter the race officially. We're expecting at least one more council member and likely some more outsiders from outside City Hall anyhow. But we're still about 9 months away from the election, plus a full presidential election. Are you surprised at how early this campaign seems to be beginning?
I'll start off by saying that I love the number 4. I represent District 4. I park on spot 4 all the time. Parking levels, when there's garages, I'm on 4. Easy to remember. But yes, absolutely, I've been surprised. From a messaging standpoint, I still think that we still have plenty of time because the presidential elections are taking up all of the space, rightfully so. And I'll take the opportunity to mention that I'm really worried right now because there's a voter suspension list that people are not talking about. It has 2.1 million Texans on it that don't realize that they may not be able to vote. And so we've got to get that ahead of people. We've got to get them to check to see if they're going to be ready to vote, to cast their votes, because if they're making the assumption and they're on that list, they're going to find out quickly that they might not be able to vote. So we need people to participate, and that's one of the other things that I'll be talking about in the next few weeks. Just a reminder, go check. If you are wanting to vote in the November election, just double check, please. Take an opportunity to do that. But yeah, absolutely. I feel that the real momentum is going to be until after November, because right now we should rightfully be focused on the presidential election.
So why throw your hat in the ring now?
I decided to throw my hat in my name in the hat now. One, because I keep my word, and I had told people that I would decide by August, and that I would decide shortly after the charter conversation. When I realized that in the charter conversation we would have to have a special election after a 2-year term is when I made my final decision. The other reason, Garrett, and I've been very open about this, is that I've been dealing with my dad's health. He has Alzheimer's, got diagnosed last September, and so I've been working on his medicine plan, making sure that everything is taken care of. I have the commitment now from my extended family, who has been like on probation, I would say, for the last few months in helping me with this. My son has really stepped up, and they want me to do it. My parents want me to do this. They are trying to be as supportive as possible, even though they don't necessarily speak English or understand even the language of politics itself. And so I figured that it is the right time to do it, and just letting the community know, because there's a lot of speculation. People kept saying, oh, well, I don't think she's running. No, well, maybe she is. And so I thought that if I just let people know now, that they would know exactly what my intentions are and there was no confusion about it.
Any last pitch to voters or viewers, I guess, on why you think you'd be the person that they should vote for in 9 months once the election comes around?
Well, I'll come around to visit you all. I plan to do a lot of block walking, so I hope that you all are ready with questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. But also, again, I am from San Antonio. When we look at the representation in the southern part of the city, there hasn't been a representative from the southern part of the city. But that doesn't mean that I would only be a supporter of the South Side. I understand the issues in the northern districts. We are very different in the South Side than from the North Side, but we are all one group of people. We're all in it for our city, to benefit our city. And while the issues might be slightly different, we all want a good quality of life. We all want to be able to live in homes, come home after our jobs, and sleep and not be scared. And I feel that I have the collaborative nature to bring people together. And whether it's bridging, just different business folks, or bridging different researchers, or bridging communities, to come together and work for the improvement of our overall city, I think that I can do that because I have a very collaborative nature.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming in.
Yeah, no problem.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Garrett.